Margaret Hayes stood at her kitchen window, watching the golden light fade over the coastal horizon. At 63, she had learned that life rarely unfolds as planned. Her silver blonde hair, swept back in a soft updo, framed a face that carried both grace and weariness. The pearl earrings she wore had been a gift from Thomas on their 30th anniversary. She touched one now, out of habit more than affection. The house felt emptier these days, not because she was alone, but because she had finally chosen to be. It had started 8 months ago, on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Margaret was sorting through Thomas's study, looking for their insurance documents. Her husband of 35 years was a methodical man, or so she had believed. Everything in its place, everything labeled and organized. But that morning, she found something that didn't belong. Tucked inside an old sailing magazine was a credit card statement, not their joint account. This was something else entirely. Margaret sat down slowly in Thomas's leather chair, her hands trembling as she scanned the charges. Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, jewelry purchases she had never received. The dates went back 3 years. She sat there for a long time, the paper growing damp in her hands. Outside, she could hear the neighbors' wind chimes dancing in the breeze. Such a peaceful sound, such an ordinary day, and yet everything had changed. Margaret didn't confront Thomas immediately. That wasn't her way. She had always been thoughtful, measured. Her mother used to say she had the patience of a saint. But patience, Margaret was learning, could also be a form of strength. Over the following weeks, she began to piece together the truth. Small things she had overlooked. Late meetings that ran longer than expected. Weekend conferences that seemed to multiply. The way Thomas had grown distant, present in body but absent in spirit. His name was revealed eventually, though Margaret never met him. Another man younger, someone Thomas had met through his sailing club. The details didn't matter as much as the weight of betrayal. 35 years of shared mornings, quiet evenings, raised children, and whispered dreams, all shadowed by this secret life. Margaret could have raged. She could have thrown dishes and demanded explanations. But she had seen that script played out in other marriages, and it never seemed to heal anything. Instead, she made a different choice. She began to plan. Thomas had been talking about the European sailing trip for months. 3 weeks exploring the Mediterranean coast with his brother, David. He was so excited about it, showing her brochures, mapping out ports of call. Margaret smiled and nodded and helped him pack. The morning he left, she kissed his cheek at the door. "Have a wonderful time," she said warmly. And she meant it, because she knew exactly what wonderful time she was about to have. The locksmith arrived that afternoon. A kind man named Robert, who didn't ask questions when Margaret explained. She wanted all the locks changed for security purposes. By evening, every door had fresh keys, and Thomas's old ones would open nothing. The next day, Margaret called their son, James, and daughter, Linda. She told them everything, her voice steady despite the pain. They were shocked, then angry, then fiercely protective. "Mom, what do you need?" Linda asked. "Just your love," Margaret replied, "and maybe help cleaning out the garage." With her children's support, Margaret began the careful work of separation. She consulted a lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia who had handled her friend Helen's divorce years before. The paperwork was filed. Assets were documented. Margaret was methodical, just as Thomas had taught her to be. Then came the car. Thomas's beloved vintage Mercedes, the one he polished every Sunday, the one he cherished almost as much as he should have cherished his marriage. Margaret listed it online at a fair price. It sold within 2 days to a collector 3 states away. She used part of that money to book herself a small trip. Nothing extravagant. Just a week at a cozy inn upstate, surrounded by autumn leaves and mountain air. She needed space to breathe, to think, to feel everything she had been holding back. The rest of the money she donated to a local women's shelter in her daughter's name. It felt right, somehow, turning something he loved into help for women rebuilding their lives. Thomas called twice during his trip. Margaret answered cheerfully both times, asking about the sailing, the weather, the food. She didn't mention anything else. There would be time for that conversation when he returned, the day of his arrival. Margaret was ready. She had moved her most cherished belongings to a storage unit. The divorce papers sat on the kitchen table, next to a handwritten letter explaining everything she knew. She didn't write it in anger. She wrote it in sadness, in disappointment, in the quiet dignity of a woman who deserved better. She wasn't there when Thomas came home. She had asked Linda to be present instead, for safety and support. Margaret spent that afternoon at the beach, walking along the shoreline she had loved for decades. The wind tangled her hair, and she let it. She felt lighter than she had in months. Linda called later. "He's confused, Emma. Upset. Trying to reach you." "I know," Margaret said. "I'll talk to him eventually. Through lawyers. But not today. Are you okay?" Linda asked gently. Margaret watched the waves roll in, steady and eternal. "I will be," she said. "I really will be." The divorce took 6 months to finalize. Thomas tried to contest certain aspects, but the evidence Margaret had gathered was thorough. The settlement was fair, though Thomas likely didn't see it that way. Margaret got the house, her rightful share of their savings, and most importantly, her freedom. Thomas moved to a condo downtown. She heard through mutual friends that he was struggling, that the relationship that had meant so much had fallen apart soon after his secret was exposed. Margaret felt no satisfaction in this. She had never wanted revenge in the vindictive sense. She had simply wanted truth and consequences, and the chance to rebuild her life with integrity. Months passed. Margaret found rhythms in her solitude. She joined a book club, started painting again, something she had abandoned years ago. Her kitchen, once used to prepare elaborate dinners for two, now made simple meals that pleased only her. And that was enough. One evening, sitting on her back porch with a glass of wine, Margaret realized something profound. She wasn't angry anymore. The betrayal still hurt, like a bone that had been broken and healed slightly crooked. But the rage, the humiliation, the desperate need to understand why, all of that had faded like fog in morning sun. What remained was something quieter. Self-respect, hard-won wisdom. The knowledge that she had handled an impossible situation with grace and strength. She had not diminished herself. She had not accepted less than she deserved. Her granddaughter, Emily, visited that weekend, 8 years old and full of questions. "Grandma, why doesn't Grandpa live here anymore?" she asked, direct as only children can be. Margaret pulled the little girl close. "Sometimes people make choices that hurt the people who love them," she said carefully. "And when that happens, the person who is hurt gets to make choices too. I chose to live somewhere that feels peaceful." "Is this peaceful?" Emily asked, looking around the garden. "Yes, sweetheart. It really is." Later, after Emily had gone home, Margaret stood once more at her kitchen window. The same golden light, the same coastal horizon, but everything was different now. She was different. She thought about the women who would stay, who would forgive, who would try to rebuild. She didn't judge them. Everyone's path through pain is their own. But this had been her path. Changing the locks, selling the car, walking away, choosing herself. In the distance, a sailboat moved across the water, its white sail bright against the darkening sky. Margaret watched it for a long moment, then turned away. She had no need to follow where it went. She had found her own direction, and she was finally truly home.